There we go. Happy Friday. Anybody else had a long week? Holy smokes, it's been a long week for me. Mm. Yeah, I was a little late this morning. We actually have a fraud deal going on. Nice. I don't see Rhonda on the meeting. So yeah. Got a call last night. Actually, I'm gonna pull this up because this is interesting. Yeah. Okay. How's everybody? Doing good? Wilhelmina, obviously we're gonna
I'm
go walk.
doing great.
You're good.
April Fools.
Yeah, right. I know.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, Lori.
Yeah, we're gonna do it next week. It's supposed to be
Yeah.
sunny again. You need to get well.
I know. I'm
been
coughing all night.
I still think like our best April Fool's joke was the one when we, gosh, it was probably 10 years ago. We put the sign up above the copy machine that says we have a new copy machine. And so now you don't hit the number of copies, you just speak to the machine. And Jim Skurczyk, I could hear him through my wall going, print 2 copies. And he comes in the corner and he's like, this machine's not working.
Yeah. Let me guess, he was wearing a striped polo shirt.
Oh my gosh, it was classic. It was yeah. It was definitely classic. So thanks for joining us this morning for new construction. But on a kind of a different note, so I was a little late this morning because I've been dealing with Rhonda Karn had a potential buyer yesterday who she went out and showed $1 million, $2 million, $3 million properties yesterday. And it was supposedly the girlfriend of a guy who had relocated and he couldn't get here, but he was on the phone with him, FaceTiming, talking to him, the whole 9 yards. So she said, the lady was driving kind of an old crappy car and she said, no offense, but she didn't look like $1 million buyer. So she asked for proof of funds. And they promptly sent off a Navy Federal Credit Union statement of account that showed a balance of $15,817,582.38. I'm going to screen share so you can see this. Sorry for chewing on a cough drop.
So, Lori, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Was this the Op City lead that came through the other day for her?
I don't know. We can look it up. It's Cade William is the guy's name.
Huh.
So if you want to take a peek.
Okay.
So Rhonda's, she's out showing property, so she doesn't look at the statement that close. And you guys can see here, statement here. I mean, it looks legit, Navy Federal, right? We come down here, active duty, checking, guys in the military, membership savings. Well, here's kind of our first clues is things are not really lining up, and year-to-date dividends at 15,031,000, right? So we go down a little farther and I start looking. I showed this to Steve Shropshire this morning. We were laughing so hard I couldn't talk. So look at where they're spending their money. They're at the Family Dollar store, they're at Circle K, they're at oh my God.
Don't mess with Taco Lobo. Okay?
Right.
You can do anything you want.
Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, but the amounts, look at this, $7.36, $5.68. Well, here was her first clue. So you go back up here and his balance is supposedly 15 million or 12 million is, so number one, it doesn't really line up, but it says beginning balance, right? And then it's supposed to be running the balance. So when they charge $14 on their $12 million account, their current balance is $102.27. These are not the smartest crooks on the block. And the running total keeps going. right? 500, 500, 500 until at one point it actually gets down to minus 19 cents. You keep going. Oh, and this is good. Let me back up a little bit here. So the guy's name is Cade William. Oh, where was it? They actually spell his name. Was it there? Yeah, they spell his name wrong. W-I-L-L. Oops, I didn't mean to delete that. W-I-L-L-A-I-M. So you keep going and you keep going and you keep going and you get down here, and on this page the balance goes from 1,077 back up to 17 million. Yeah, but here's your other clue. So they're doing all these debits to canteen vending for $1.15, right? And the balance doesn't really change. They got lazy, so they just left the balance alone until it finally gets down to the bottom, and gee, this looks legit, right? It goes from $38.91 back up to 15,742,888, and then it just stays there, right? Needless to say, this is fraudulent. So, yeah, it's all.
Well, what really is the telltale sign that these guys are not smart is all of this checking account never is included. That page one is the only thing you ever see in proof of funds. So the fact that they attached all these "I'm a dumb shit" addendums, running balances and all that, that just blew their case.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Rhonda was smart enough, so she got on the phone, called the 800 number for Navy Federal last night because there was an account number on there, supposed one, and verified that the account did not exist. So this morning, I told her, call the cops, call the other broker who they had actually written the offer and were ready to present it, had an earnest money check and everything. So call the other broker, tell him obviously that it is a bogus offer, apologize to the seller, and stop. So the question is, why would somebody want to do this?
Yeah.
Right?
What's the end game?
So I came up with a couple of thoughts, and I'd love to hear more. But one of them is they could be casing $1 million houses for potential robbery. That's the first thing that comes to my mind, right? Number two, they could be trying to. So they put down a $60,000 earnest money, right? So if Rhonda had deposited it, and then for whatever reason they walk away from the transaction and make a demand for that $60,000 back, they're hoping that the title company is dumb enough to not wait until that check clears and just issue them a check for 60 grand, which would be valid, and they'd walk away with $60,000 in their pocket. That was plan B that I came up with. And plan C is they're just sick people out there that get their jollies off going and looking at $1 million houses. It's so bizarre. But good for Rhonda Karn for catching this. Good for Rhonda for actually asking for the proof of funds and then taking the time to look at the proof of funds. Not to mention her safety, her potential safety. I mean, she's out alone, although she wasn't with the guy. She was with first she said wife, then she said they were getting married in July. I mean, the stories.
Do you know what her name was?
His name was William Cade. I don't know what her name was.
Okay.
I'll get it from Rhonda.
Okay.
It's Cade, C-A-D-E, Lisa.
Yeah, there's been some women that she's accepted as leads like over the last 4 days. So I'm just wondering.
Okay.
Because if that's the case, we need to let Op City know as well.
Well,
another thing they do, Lori, is they case it, they open up a window somewhere, unlock a window, and then they move in.
good point, because she was out showing 1 million, 2 million, $3 million, and her spidey senses went up when the lady said, or the lady and the guy he was on the phone said, oh, well, this seller seems like a really nice guy, because they met the seller. So we're just going to go ahead and make a full price, all cash offer for this. And we'll pay for the furniture too. We'll just do that too. Yeah. Bali, I run into these type of people twice a week at my jewelry business. God knows how many stores get ripped off with fake transaction on fraudulent cards. Bolly's family owns the jewelry. What's it called out in the mall, Bolly? Oh, hold your space bar down. There you go.
So we sell gold there, and people, whenever they look at bigger chains, because it's like on the displays is either $2,500 or $3,000. So the first thing they want to ask is, oh, can I see that? And we changed our policies like before COVID, when everybody was in the masks. We don't want to hand jewelry anymore. So now, believe it or not, we don't even let people touch it. You put the cash up front, we want to let you touch it, or you can walk away. And serious people, they definitely bring cash in, and then we let them touch it.
Right.
But I every day, at least now, because of robberies, I mean, everybody know how many shopliftings are happening, and they bring fake cards, and we don't even take credit cards without their ID,
Mhm.
because they are somebody else's, and they say, oh, we are authorized to use it. And they rip like champs and buckles. Everybody knows they have like good stuff. They bring their bag full of stuff and use those cards, and when they come to us, we check the ID and then we let them go. And it happens pretty much every day, or twice a week is a guaranteed. It's bad.
Yeah. So just FYI, heads up, it isn't the first time we've run into this issue before, but I haven't seen it for a long, long time. So we'll be talking more about it on Tuesday, because there's actually more fraud going on. But this one struck a little close to home. Julie, got a comment for us?
Yeah, I had a similar kind of a weird, not similar, but a lady named Geneva Wood. And is that a lady whose name we've noted before? Geneva
Yeah.
Wood, it seemed familiar. Anyway, she texted, she wants to write an offer on my listing. I'm like, okay, would you like to make an appointment to see it? She texts back or emails, I would like to make an offer on your listing, not responding to my offer to make an appointment. It's like a robocall situation or
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
Anyway, third time, I would like to see this, doesn't respond to my questions about when I'm available. Let's make an appointment. It's like no response, just some kind of a robo thing. And then I kind of dismissed it. And then she contacted again, same thing. It's
Yeah.
like, property has a sale pending, would you like assistance with others? No, thank you. That was it. It was just,
And Tessa Runestrand, her question, do we report this to the multiple? Yes, we'll report it to the multiple and the Association of Realtors, because yes, there are definite potential safety issues, but I just men and women on this call, because the safety goes across all borders. Heads up, boys and girls. Don't be afraid of insulting someone by asking them for proof of funds or a driver's license before you go out with them. If you haven't met them before, don't go to a vacant house and meet someone who you haven't met before. Take a buddy, take a friend. I mean, I'll go, whatever. Let us know where you're going. Just be heads up. Yeah, anyway, so thank you. Now let's talk new construction. It was interesting. I went back into I have a folder, agent, whatever. And I just typed in the word builder, and all of these contracts that Blake and I have worked on negotiating on new construction started popping up, and every single one of them, unfortunately, had been kind of a nightmare. Not all new construction is, but there's so many pitfalls and there's so many unknowns and there's so many negotiations that take place later in a transaction. If they start the new build from ground zero, it can go on for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. Tempers run high, builders get sick of the client gets cranky at the builder. And the biggest thing is when you make an offer that's accepted on a new build, let's say it happened in December, and we're getting ready now to close in April. What do you think the price of that has done since you made your offer, right? The price of the property has probably gone up. It's not unusual to get an appraisal on a new build that is 100,000 over, 200,000 over what the initial offer was. So what goes through the builder's head? The builder says, I actually hope this buyer walks away. I'm going to make their life rough because I left money on the table. I can make more money. Not all of them are like that, but it makes difficult negotiations at the end, because that's usually the first thing. I dealt with one last week, and that's usually the first thing the builder says. Go ahead and walk away. If you don't close, I've got 3 other people lined up behind you that will pay more money. and I'll sell it to them. So, Blake, you've had a lot more experience with new construction. You did the development down in Anacortes with Russ Jeter. And I'm sure every transaction was not a walk in the park.
Not with Russ, no. So I honestly don't have a ton of experience. It was actually a learning curve for me. There was 15 new build outs, and they were actually they were condominiumized, the houses like up there in Cordata, where basically they're called airspace condos. They're four corners of the lot are what you're buying. Typical condo, you're buying, the interior contents, but the house condos you're buying the four. So that they're not, I'm going on a bunny trail, but they're not
So
responsible.
that's a good one, because I don't know what an airspace condo is. Explain it to us. Yep. What?
Well, it's just a typical condo. You have common areas, and you have, the associations, covers the roof and the siding and blah, blah, blah. Airspace condos is kind of like you're buying a house. I mean, you're responsible for the whole thing. It's just, basically it's a different way to take title. And builders find it advantageous because they can typically squeeze about another 10 to 15% of lots out of that same parcel if they go this route. So in Russ's case, he got, I think, another 3 lots. So it was
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was worth it because you can shrink them down much smaller. Anyway, so in his case, he was he had a builder's addendum, and I would suggest using the addendums that are the pre-sale and or the builder's addendum that are in the MLS represent the buyer. But a lot of times they'll nix those, and most builder addendums will say, if not all, this trumps anything else in the purchase and sale agreement. So you need to really go over that particular builder's addendum. And it really, they're the boss. If they can delay it, and it's because of cost, overruns, deliveries. They have a multitude of angles that they can just continue to delay it, and the buyer really kind of can't get out. Most builders, especially in this climate, will say, fine, you can go ahead and get it inspected, but you're not going to have an inspection contingency. And you can go ahead and finance it, but you're not going to have a financing contingency. And don't be alarmed, because that's very typical. They don't want 3 days before closing for the buyer to raise their hand and get out, especially when they pick the colors and the granite and this, that, and the other.
Inspections is another one. Normally they won't allow what is a normal 35, because that gives the buyer, of course, a get out of jail free card. And you can be 6 months into the transaction, and the last thing the builder wants is the buyer having the ability to walk 2 days before closing, which is what a normal, if you do nothing to it, inspection addendum is. That being said, I still do recommend an inspection after the certificate of occupancy, for the simple reason of creating a punch list. And then the fun begins getting the builder to finish the punch list prior to closing, because they've already got the certificate of occupancy, which is really all they need to sell the house. But they have paint touch up, they have landscaping that's not done, they have a fence that's not in, they have a shower door that didn't show up, they have a refrigerator that didn't show up. Well, none of those things are going to affect your certificate of occupancy, but it's certainly going to fire up your buyer, who's going to say, how do I know I'm ever going to get this stuff? How do I know he's ever going to come back and finish it? I've talked to the neighbors, and the neighbors had a hell of a time getting him to come back. So hopefully our goal today is to go through the pre-sale addendum and the pre-sale optional clauses that the Northwest Multiple provides. Whether you use them or not, you should use them, definitely. And or the builder provides his own. Hopefully it's going to give you some information and some talking points about what to know about new construction. Now, new construction can be completed and ready to move into. New construction can be a piece of dirt out in a development, and they say they're going to build a home just like the one over here on lot 32. And so go ahead and write an offer based on that. So it can be vague enough in the future, or it can be very specific. New construction to me means that really the certificate of occupancy gets issued and really nobody has probably lived in the house. That would qualify as kind of new construction. That's my interpretation, not a legal one. But like Blake says, a lot of builders do provide their own builder addendums because they may not be as well covered for contingencies in this particular addendum. So I've had a lot of people reach out, and I know Blake has as well, and they send us a 10-page builder addendum and say, hey, will you take a look at this? Is it okay for my buyer to sign? And we've never seen the addendum before. It was obviously drafted by an attorney. It protects the seller probably more than the buyer. Strike probably, it absolutely does because their attorney drafted it. And so let's just have a little pretest here. What's the first thing that you should do after reading through the addendum and giving obviously a copy to the buyer? What do you tell them? What's the first thing you tell them? Come on, it's Friday.
You should have an attorney review it for you.
Yep. And why is that, Jennifer?
Because it's not one of our forms that we're used to. So, and as you said, it's designed to protect the seller, not the buyer.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, we're not attorneys. We are licensed to fill in spaces on simple contracts, fill in the blanks. We are not licensed to draft or interpret narrative contracts, which is where they're, somebody else has drafted them. It was drafted by an attorney. And while you can certainly give an opinion, whether the buyer chooses to go to an attorney or not, I want you to recommend that they do if you have a custom builder addendum. And then I want you to confirm that in writing via email, text, whatever. You can put it in the contract with an attorney review. I would say the likelihood of the buyer going to an attorney is fairly slim. However, if they get 6 months into the contract and get into a spitting match with the builder, I'll bet they wish they would have, because they're going to come back and say, Trisha, I had no idea that this guy could just keep extending forever, and there's nothing I can do about it. There's no penalty. I had no idea that he was only going to put up one side of the fence and not the other two. Why didn't you tell me? So the conversation really needs to include an attorney. It doesn't have to be scary, but anytime you get into grounds like that we're not familiar with, I mean, look at all the time we're spending studying these forms, and then they hand you something drafted by an attorney and tell you if it's okay to sign, ask you, and you're going to say nope. So yes, definitely an attorney. So let's jump over. Julie, got a quick comment? Or
Yeah,
your
it's been a while since I've done it, but I would always put in with create an attorney review clause on behalf of our clients and offer to pay, $250, buyer broker will pay, or if the buyers are at all squeamish, just to cover ourselves and encourage them to go do it. It is worth our time. And
There's actually an attorney review clause, pre-printed form in the multiple now. And if you're going to offer, that's a good idea to put that, but I would make it paid at closing. You will reimburse them at closing. That's just how I like to do things. You don't have to, you can pay them up front, but whatever. Okay, let's move on. Pre-sale addendum, here we go. This was drafted back in 2010. It hasn't really been, which I thought was interesting, it hasn't really been touched. So you're going to do a regular purchase and sale agreement. It's following as a part of the purchase and sale agreement. You're going to do residential for things like closing date. You are probably going to refer to this addendum. And for other things like financing, inspection, here's what happens. Like financing, they have to make application within 5 days. Well, for a construction loan, there's actually two kinds of build, where the client hires a builder to build a house on their behalf, or more commonly, the ones we're involved in, where the builder is building a complete house and then the buyer pays cash at closing via a loan and closes on it. That's what we're talking about today. So the buyer can definitely go make their application within 5 days, but they certainly can't get an inspection within 10 because there's nothing to inspect. Okay. So you're going to have to make some type of a notation, and the builder is probably going to strike the buyer's ability to cancel the contract if they're not satisfied. but you do want to get in there the idea that they're going to have an inspection done. You want to have a third party go through, do the inspection, because it's not uncommon for polarity to be reversed. The dryer vent's not hooked up. The plumbing isn't complete. The HVAC isn't done. And these are things that a normal buyer and I'm not an inspector. I'm not going to find this. So they're going to create a punch list. Then the buyer is going to go through the property, and the buyer is going to look for cosmetic things and things like landscaping that an inspector is not going to catch, but you're going to look for nicks in the paint. You're going to look for the fence that isn't up. Again, the front landscaping that was supposed to be completed and the sod put down. Which again sounds great, but if you are in August in the middle of a drought, the builder's going to tell you, I don't want to put sod in right now because that sod is going to die unless you go out there and water it every single day. So these are things I just want you to be aware of when you're dealing with new construction. So here we go. Following terms are included in an agreement. Improvements being or to be constructed pursuant to plan or model number, if they've got one, consist of a single family house with bedrooms, baths, and a garage. Are there CC&Rs? So if they're CC&Rs, those would be available up front, and the buyer has 10 days by default to review and approve or not. And don't miss that step. There may be an HOA being created with that, and like maybe they can't park boats in the driveway, and your buyer has a 32-foot trophy that is the love of their life, and part of the reason they're buying it is because it's got a big driveway and they want to be able to store their boat there. So if buyer does not give written notice, so this is an automatic default. Buyer has 3 days to review. The contingency is deemed satisfied. And is there an architectural review committee approval? If you're buying from a builder, hopefully they've already got that done before they got their permit. An example of this would probably be Shelter Bay, Sutton Valley. They do have architectural review. Sometimes a house has to be a minimum square footage, has to be painted a certain color, roof has to be a certain material. So there's different things that they want to review. Plans and specs. Buyer's right to approve. The agreement is conditioned on buyer's review and approval of the plans and specs to be constructed on the property. Seller shall deliver the plans and specs to the buyer no later than 5 days after mutual acceptance. So usually what happens, and again, Blake, feel free to jump in, is that the buyer, you as the buyer's agent, and the builder or the builder's representative, sometimes they have design people, but that's more for picking out carpet and paint and that type of thing. But this is where you deliver the plans to the buyer takes a look at them, and then the fun begins with something called change orders. Change orders are things like the buyer saying, I don't want a bathtub in the master bathroom, I just want a really big walk-in shower, can we make that change? I would like a hot tub out on my back deck, can we build the deck bigger? I want the kitchen remodeled or rearranged, and I want it done like this. So
and this is where non-refundable kicks in, and this is where there's this.
Yep.
You know, this is where it's understandable, right? Builder's going to deviate from their original plan, but it's going to cost them, because if the deal goes south and they got to sell it to somebody else, they got to be able to absorb maybe something that most buyers wouldn't want. Larger window in the master or a slider in the master. We had that a couple of times. And so most buyers are like, yeah, okay, I get it. But then, the honeymoon's over and the builder's got, 3 months delay, and the buyer says, hey, I want out. So I'm just kind of devil's advocate, just laying it out there that, they're almost undoubtedly, even if there wasn't changes, there will be non-refundable. That's the deal with builders.
And that includes a change to custom paint color. Maybe the buyers want the living room painted purple. Well, if those buyers default and the seller or the builder has to put it back on the market, they're going to have to repaint that
Right.
purple. So there's going to be a cost involved.
Different
So do you-
tile over the fireplace. I don't like that one. I want this one. I don't like that mantle. I want this one. One thing I'll tell you guys though, when you deal with new construction is the listing agent is actually a lot of help. And so it's not typical. I mean, it shouldn't be adversarial. They know the drill. So again, don't, put a blindfold on, but listing agents are a lot of help on how the process works, what you can expect, what the builder's hot buttons are, how it works. So, really kind of work that.
100%. So the next question though is, so the builder wants non-refundable. I want all upgraded appliances, Blake, and I'm going to pick out this Gucci LaRue fridge and this 6-burner gas commercial range. And, so my appliance package just went from 6,000 to 16,000, let's say. So the builder says, yeah, hey, no problem. You go down and pick out the appliances, and but you're going to pay for the upgrade. Oh, by the way. And the buyer says, well, okay, so who do I make the check out to? And if this doesn't go through, do I get my money back? Well, the answer is no. And the check is made out, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the check is made out directly to the builder. You're going to get a receipt for it. It does not go through escrow. Definitely want to keep track of it. Side note on Gucci appliances, our supply chain is a little challenged right now. And to go down and to Dewar & Bodie and just buy a normal Frigidaire side-by-side fridge, you can get one off the floor, Lowe's or whatever. But once you start getting into the custom models, it's not unusual for these appliances to be back ordered 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. So then you run into the situation of you get to closing and there's no refrigerator. That actually happened to us, size on this call. With a client out in Sutton Valley who had ordered an upgraded fridge through no fault of the builders. It wasn't available. Dewar & Bodie couldn't get their hands on it.
Yeah, Lori, that fridge is still not in yet, and we finished construction end of March last year, so it's been well over a year. Luckily for them, we were able to negotiate a temporary fridge, which the listing agent provided, but it's very small for the size of the family that it needs to occupy. So it's but appliances are very hard to get right now.
Yep. So one theme of this whole class that we've been having is managing buyers' expectations. I'm not saying scare the crap out of them, but I'm also saying don't be promising them the moon. Oh, great, that's a beautiful fridge. It'll look really nice in your kitchen. I'm sure it won't be a problem. Because the reality is that it's not a problem, but there sure as heck might be a delay. And like Cy said, he did a great job negotiating with the builder at Dewar & Bodie, and they agreed to supply a temporary fridge. But like he said, it's not a very nice fridge, but it's a fridge. At least they've got something besides an ice cooler in their kitchen. But I didn't know it wasn't still there. So that's been over a year. Oh my God. Okay. Seller's right to modify. So this is the builder within 3 days of seller's receipt of buyer's notice of disapproval. So if the buyer disapproves, so buyer's notice of disapproval shall specifically identify the aspects of the plans and specs of which the buyer disapproves. This is not, by the way, normally how it goes, but this is how the contract goes. And then the seller can come back within 3 days and say, okay, no problem, we'll modify the plans. If the seller desires to increase the purchase price as a consequence of any such modifications, then the procedures in paragraph 4 shall apply. So it's actually baked right in here. This is where exactly what Blake said. We'll get to paragraph 4 in a minute. If the seller disagrees, they can't get off dead center, then the buyer does have the right to terminate. And they've got buyer gives notice within 3 days of the expiration. If buyer gives such notice, earnest money shall be refunded. If buyer does not give notice of termination, buyer will be deemed to have accepted the plan. So just remember that almost every contingency in all of these regular old multiple forms, with the exception of feasibility where you check the box, if you do nothing, if you miss a time, then you are deemed approved and you're going to be moving forward. Non-refundable payments contingent on satisfaction or waiver of the contingency. No payment to sellers shall become non-refundable until the contingency in paragraph 3 is satisfied or waived. So you can't, the builder can't ask for a non-refundable without having the plans and specs approved by the buyer. That's all that's saying. That's the very preliminary first step. Here we get into decoration selections, upgrades, or changes, commonly called change orders. Unless otherwise specified, any additions, changes, decorator selections, because a lot of times the buyer will bring their designer in, and their designer may have champagne taste on your buyer's beer budget. And just heads up on that. So landscaping, site plan, any other modifications made after mutual acceptance, including but not limited to modifications resulting from buyer's initial review of the plans in paragraph 3 shall be subject to the mutual agreement of the buyer and the seller. The seller has to agree to it. All changes have to be agreed to in writing and shall be based on an agreed price. So what you do is your buyer comes up with a wish list, you give it to the builder, the listing broker and or the builder. Builder comes up with a price, usually on the same addendum, shoots it back to you, and then your buyer either agrees, disagrees, signs off, whatever. Pricing of the changes may include costs to the seller, such as costs of extra design, estimating, supervision, rescheduling, restocking, delays, as well as unusual cost of material, labor, and seller's normal markup, which can run anywhere from 10 to 20%. So that refrigerator that's $1,000 may be billed back to your buyer at $1,100, $1,200. Doesn't always work. Actually, with appliances, you usually get a discount, but the seller is not going to do this for free. With respect to decorator selections, buyers entitled to make selections of colors, floor coverings, fixtures, appliances the seller has not already ordered, provided the buyer makes such selections within 3 days following the request of the seller. The seller's going to give them notice. Hey, it's time to go make your, I need your lighting package. I need to know what you're going to be picking for your chandelier in the dining room, your lights in the kitchen, the sconces outside, all of that good stuff. All selections must be made from seller's standard stock of material within allowances specified. So the builder is going to give them a allowance for a lighting package, as for an example. And you can go out to ABC Lighting Company, meet with Susie out there, and she'll go through the lighting packages. And inevitably, the buyers will come back and say, that was all great, but I want to upgrade this, this, and this. So then you get back into how much does it cost? The addendum goes over to the builder. Builder's going to give you a price, or Susie out at ABC Lighting. And the buyer is then going to get out the checkbook and pay. This is not normally done one by one. A lot of times they lump a lot of these upgrades together. There'll probably be an upgrade at the very beginning if there's plan modifications, which there probably will be, landscape upgrades, that type of thing. So there's going to be a check probably issued from the get-go.
You know, with respect to, like with Russ, I don't think there was one. I mean, these are the lights that are coming with the house. And there was not one out of 15, there's not one that said, I don't like them. I guess I would just, typically, if the builder is building a number of houses, they have, they have a showroom. And so they'll schedule an appointment and they'll just, it's like ordering a pizza. You want more, you're going to pay more. But it's like, this is what's coming with. There it is. There's your choices of granite. There's your choices of color. The blah, 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 blah. And it's, and we're, it's not like here's a pamphlet, pick a color. Here's a pamphlet, pick, if they're, building any more than 10 houses a year, they have a showroom, and it makes it easier.
Definitely. Absolutely. And as builders are fond of saying, hey, Mr. Buyer, this ain't a custom. This is a spec. A custom is where you hire a builder and you go in with your dream plan and you control, as the buyer, every single little aspect with your designer and your decorator and everything else. That is a custom home. It is made to your personal specifications from ground up. A spec home is just what it sounds like. A spec home is, it's cookie cutter within reason. Like Blake says, here's your color choices, here's your flooring choices, here's your appliance package, here's your lighting package. So you've got a little bit of choice, but this is not a custom home, folks. if you
They're
want to.
they're not gonna deviate from the plans that are approved from the city or county. They're not gonna move walls, and, I would say that at this point, you may probably know your client. And you may know that they may think that they're gonna get accustomed. A lot of buyers want to go in there, Rambo in, guns a-blazing. This is how it's going to go down. And, it's not going to be pretty.
It doesn't work that way. And so the conversation at some point does need to remind the buyer that this is a spec home. It's going to be you, and you're going to be able to, customize it, the colors, or, it's going to have different flooring, probably from your neighbors. But it is not a custom home. So
There's GP. There's GP down there. I was going to say, where's Greg on this? He does more new construction than anybody.
he was cute. He said the other day, and I said, will you chime in? Yeah. What do you find with your builders, Greg? Are you on?
I hate Zoom because you can't sit at the back of the class.
If anybody doesn't know, Greg does a lot of work with builders out in Sudden Valley. He pretty much owns our builder market out there. He does it from the beginning. He sells them the lot that they ultimately build on, and then he turns around and sells the house that they built, right?
Yeah, I try and list lots, quality lots. That gets builder interest. If they buy it, there's this unwritten rule in our business that you find me the dirt and you get the house listing. So, I've always done that, and built a business on it. So, but you guys are exactly right. I came in late because I got a couple lot deals that finally came to mutual acceptance. But the contract, the pre-sale addendums are great, but they're written for nothing's been done. They haven't even maybe scratched the dirt. Maybe you've just picked out your lot. And most of us don't sell them that way. Some of us do probably. I don't. I sell them when the roof is on and they just put the windows in, but the siding's not on or whatever. And so there's a lot of those forms. I know them inside and out. I cross out a lot, and they don't have the options. Like one part will say ACC review or they get to approve the site plan. No, they don't get to do any of that. And Lori hit it right on the nose. You are buying the builder's house. It's his house. It's not typically your house. It's not a custom house. And that's why I do a walkthrough with the selling agent if I don't sell it. And I go through the rules of the game as best I can, because it's all expectation. And then the other thing, you're married, if it's not done, the house might be 90 days out. That could be a brutal 90 days if you don't set the ground rules, early.
What's your number one ground rule? Or give me your top three, Greg, that you tell a prospective buyer when they're walking in midway, framing's up, roof's on, and they're buying a new house. So what are the top three things you tell them to manage expectations?
I almost go overboard on first I'd say the rules, that it's the builder's house and he's just trying to finish it. And this is an opportunity for you because oftentimes it's not on the market and I'm putting something together, that's off market. And so I let him know that he's just trying to finish. And especially in this day and age if you haven't ordered it, garage doors right now are 22 months out. So, it's much easier to do no changes right now than ever before, but I'm kind of the no change guy. It's kind of like, let me be the bad guy real early, no to everything, but you can ask. And that's where I started. Paint color sometimes, countertops sometimes, plumbing fixtures. But like Blake said, expanding a deck, do we want to go back to the county and Sudden Valley? And, no, you do that. You do that later, after the final permit and closing and stuff. So that's what I kind of, but then I have builders like Joe Tabert and Linden, who's wonderful about buyer requests, or Rubicon. Rubicon's kind of a custom home builder. But any change, non-refundable deposits, and the builders love that. But I don't really, and we shouldn't as brokers. There's just so many risks, especially coming into the recession in 2007. And I won't go into it and waste a lot of time, but there was builders going out of business. And so these big non-refundable deposits, they're scary because they're paid up front. And, you know, again, if you can do no changes and just have the people be happy with, it's going to be beautiful no matter what the builder's already picked. You're going to have a better transaction. So
good job. Yeah, thanks.
You know, Kirk Gill's a real good friend of mine. He's done skiers stuff forever. He doesn't. They don't even take a pre-sale addendum. They say, here's our addendum. That pre-sale addendum. I don't know. You might deal with that too, Greg. But just so you guys know, it's not a guarantee that pre-sale addendum because it is kind of buyer heavy.
It's
the
definitely
one thing
buyer.
I like in the pre-sale addendum is the paragraph that says if you make any changes, they're prepaid in cash upfront. And that'll slow things down sometimes too. If something costs $5,000 or $10,000, it's a big deal. You know, if they make that change and do that kind of an upgrade. I like that paragraph. So I talk about that in that walkthrough as well, that everything changed is paid advance or we move on. So.
And that's where this all is. If nothing else, hopefully, and it's not uncommon for like skiers to use their own. They obviously build a lot of homes, but this will at least increase your knowledge so you'll have a starting point of talking points of things that you know that your buyer is going to end up going through. So this addendum assumes, like Greg said, it's buyer heavy, that they get to do a lot of these changes. And here's where it talks about the pricing. It talks about it a little further down. So here it is right here. Any change requested by the buyer, including but not limited to any changes in decorator selections which exceeds the allowances specified or otherwise increases construction costs, must be paid by buyer directly to seller in cash in advance and will be non-refundable. Period. End of conversation. That's common in almost every single new construction. I am going to show you a contract, however, where a builder goofed. He was new, and I'll show you how. Yeah, we'll get there. If buyer wishes to have non-refundable reflected in the final purchase price for financing and or title insurance, then payment for the change will be increased by 5% to reflect the increased cost to the seller. So in other words, the cost of the house is $500,000 and they want $10,000 in upgrades. So if they don't have $10,000 to pay the builder and they say, no, let's just add it into our loan, so I can go to the bank and get this. And so it would go to $510,000. Well, in this particular case, it would be $510,050 or whatever that difference is to reflect the increased cost to the seller. Is the seller going to like this? No, because they're not going to get the money. The deal never closes, the loan never happens, the builder never gets paid, and he's stuck holding the bag. So again, like Greg said, there's a lot of things in here that are very buyer centric, but at least I would say probably in 50% of the cases, a lot of the new construction I'm seeing is actually using this addendum. So
Greg, do you see, well, another reason builder doesn't like it is because it's going to up their closing costs, but do you see many changes built into the purchase price, Greg?
No, and I was going to jump in. I never have added to the purchase. The purchase price never changes. It's in escrow. We're proceeding. We do an addendum and we say what the change is as clearly as we can. And we say what it costs and that it will be paid within 3 days, of signing of this addendum or whatever. And yeah, like this addendum, this is how crazy it can get.
I gotta pull this one up, and I hope you can you see this new addendum that I pulled up that has all these red marks on it? Say, give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, so this is one that I'm dealing with right now, and this is one where we are down to the 11th hour. The house is not complete. The builder said the house was complete. Come on out. Final occupancy. I should be getting it by tomorrow. Bring your inspector. And they get out there and it's just an absolute shit show. Nothing is hooked up. The landscaping's not done. The plumbing's not hooked up. Nothing was done. The paint wasn't done. I mean, it was just, and the buyers went livid. and said, I don't even want to buy this house anymore. I'm tired of dealing with this builder. I'm tired of the delays. And here is an addendum where a rookie builder had agreed to bake in the cost of all of these changes to the new purchase price. And you can see this is not a little purchase. We're up in the $1.2 million range. So seller to add epoxy flooring, double solar panels, upgrade solar inverter, attic access, yada, 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 on and on and on. Alarm monitoring. I mean, here's all of the costs, and all they did was modify the sales price. So now we get down to a buyer who says, pound sand, I don't want to buy this anymore. And they say, can we get out of this contract? Well, this builder also made another mistake and allowed them to do an inspection addendum with a time frame that began upon issuance of occupancy permit. So what that means is when the occupancy permit is issued, the 10-day clock on the inspection addendum starts ticking, and that builder and their broker made no modifications to the Form 35. So what do you think? According to this contract, the buyer has a probability of being able to get out of it. Now, I'm not going to tell them that. I'm going to tell them they got to go talk to an attorney, because that builder is going to go nuclear if they try to walk, because he's done all these upgrades. He hasn't been paid for them, and they may have a legal right to walk. They only have, oh, by the way, there's only $20,000 earnest money, and it's not even non-refundable. So our broker who represented the buyer actually did a pretty good job positioning the buyer. I can't believe that she got away with it with the builder. Now, we've put them back together again, because I said our goal is always to get them over the finish line, get them to buy the house. They've settled down, they've calmed down, and we're trying to get the builder to finish the dang house. So, Greg, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I see those initials, and this builder needs protection, and someone didn't protect him very well.
Well, and you know, the irony is the person who was representing him, she is a very, very, very seasoned builder's broker.
Builder's broker. I could see broker, but it is a
No,
different,
she works
it is
for
a different
Windermere.
game.
She works for Windermere. She knows better. She did not protect her client, but we didn't do anything wrong.
No, and that's why you don't do all that. It gets paid up front, and even inspection. There's no inspection contingency when you buy a house.
Right.
It's in the pre-sale addendum. There's a walkthrough. There's other things, but there's no contingency. You
Right.
can't have that at the 12th hour, you know. So it just takes trial and error. And when you make the mistakes, and I'm sure I have, you know, over the years, and a lot of reading, you really need to read this and understand it before you go to your builder or buyer. And I mean, it takes a lot of explaining. It's good you're doing this, Lori, because this is big time, big game. So,
and the other thing that was not used was a pre-sale addendum, and the builder did not have their own addendum. Fortunately, we've got everybody moving forward, and if the builder will just finish the damn house, I think we'll get it over the finish line. The tricky part is going to get him to come back and finish the punch list. All those little paint things that need touch up, and you know, a good clean. I mean, there's so many little things at the end. The buyer expects, they're paying $1.2 million for a house. They expect the dang thing to be clean, right? We walked into the house. The builder was there spraying air freshener, and our broker said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, this smell for some reason makes buyers think the house has been cleaned." And she's like, "No, it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be professionally cleaned." Cy will vouch for this. It's an experience unlike any other when you run into a difficult builder. Trying to get it over the finish line can be very, very challenging. That's when you involve Blake, you involve me, and you know, let us help. But it says right here, buyer understands and agrees in the event the transaction fails to close. Other than the seller's default, the buyer's payment for any changes are non-refundable and will be retained by seller. Boom. Can't be any more clear than that.
So one thing I'll say is, looks like the house is clean smell with the Lisa. That trick is up. But You know, a lot of our agents have sold landed gentry houses, and they are great.
Yeah.
I mean, they, you know, they're a builder, and you know, you can have it inspected, but you're not having an inspection contingency. And they flat out say, go ahead and get it inspected and hand us the inspection. We'll use that as a punch list to fix everything, you know, blue tape or whatever. But also they're after closing, hey, don't nickel and dime us. You will come on the 11th month, because you get a 12-month window. We'll come on the 11th and a half month and we'll repair everything. But don't call us once a month because of this or that. And so they're very upfront about that. And I mean, they're in it for the long haul. I mean, they have a good reputation of making things right. I was telling Lori the other day that one of our agents sold one of their houses, and in the listing it said $5,000 credit or irrigation. Well, our agent never wrote that into the purchase agreement. And about 3 days before closing, their buyers said, hey, well, what's the deal with this irrigation? Of course, you know, deer in a headlight look. So he calls Kendra, who's the one of the owners, Kendra and Brian Gentry, Kendra Decker, who's great. And she goes, oh, shoot. She just said, okay, just what do they want? They want irrigation, or they want the credit? And just like, I mean, 9 out of 10 builders would say pound sand, because it's all about profit. No, they got the credit, and then it went down the road. So they're not all like that, but I'm just saying there are some really good builders that believe in, hey, I'm here for the long haul. That $5,000 will buy me a lot of bad advertising. So I'm just gonna give them credit.
Absolutely.
Like quick note on that 12-month window, because yes, there are good builders, but there's also very rookie builders. That Sudden Valley house that we were talking about, that was the first house he'd ever built, the builder. And he, after construction, went rogue and I guess moved to Florida and had never paid his contractors up fully. So we had a plethora of issues come up that I was trying to get resolved with the builder and the listing agent. And we came to find out that even the listing agent, it was her first time doing a pre-sale. So that whole deal was a nightmare. So like Lori said, you know, I'm also not trying to scare everyone off of pre-sale, not trying to discourage people, but it's very tricky, especially when a spec home starts to become a custom home and that things are not being written down and you're not dealing with a seasoned builder or a seasoned listing agent. You know, things fall through the crack, and then come closing time, there's money left on the table that someone is going to have to pay up if things weren't written down properly. Lawyers will get involved and it gets messy. I've been there.
Well, let's talk about the extended policies on title insurance, Lori.
Yeah.
You know,
And bonds, builder bonds, right? And bonds, right? Builders have bonds.
Builders have bonds, but contrary to popular belief, builders, they don't have to give you a warranty. Everybody thinks, well, they have to give you a warranty. The state's got to give you. No, they don't have to give you a warranty. They don't have to give you a 1 year warranty. Everybody thinks builders have to give a 1 year warranty. Completely 100% false.
And I don't know where that came from, but everybody I talk to seems to think that it's a law in the state. Well, that's the first thing. Well, isn't it a law in Washington? They have to give us a 1 year warranty.
I believe most title companies for an extra 10% will do an extended policy that will cover unrecorded liens. The builders have to file within 9 months of the last time that they were on the job site, right? Or not the builder, but the sub.
The contractor, right?
Drywaller said, hey, I wasn't paid. If he goes 9 months and 1 day, the window has closed for him to file a lien on that property. Now, I do believe that there's a limit to what the title companies will cover. Last I heard it was 25 grand, which, you know, is better than nothing. But check with your title company on unrecorded liens on new construction, what they cover.
You can also
a 10% bump in the title policy is a drop in the bucket.
What's the other one called where you actually have the sub sign something
Greg,
saying
what's that called again? It's
they've been paid in full. I've got that on our driveway project we're doing.
A lien release, right?
What's
like that? Yeah.
Lien release. Thanks, Tessa.
Yeah.
I saw Kinsey lurking in the background. He should be on this call too.
He's sitting there. I said, you know, you're on camera, right? And he was like, whatever, that's fine.
Tessa says,
everyone talk bad about builders.
we're not talking bad about builders. We're trying to save you people that are pains in the ass. So anyway, all right, back at it here. I will screen share. Oops, wrong one. Hold on just a second. Okay. Why that keeps coming up? That's not the one I want. Your screen sharing is paused. All right, never mind. I don't want to do that. Screen share, be nice. There. Everybody see location of home and site characteristics. So that's a site plan. And again, this is assuming that the house isn't built and the builder reserves the right, if the house isn't built, in almost every single addendum to place the house where they think it's best. So you can't spin it around for better feng shui. You can't spin it around so that it's facing, south instead of southeast. There is a pre-approved, they have to go through the county or the city, and that's all been approved. Clearing the property, limited to reasonably necessary to permit adequate access to the building area. They're not necessarily going to go in and clear cut everything. Landscaping. This is one where I see more arguments is landscaping and fences. Seller agrees to landscape the property in a manner consistent with the appearance of the neighborhood and the new home. Buyer acknowledges seller will also landscape in order to meet engineering requirements such as grading and water drainage. Buyer acknowledges the matters of landscaping have been delegated to the seller at the seller's sole discretion. Well, how vague is that? So that basically says they're going to grade the property, maybe throw some bark on it, and if you're lucky, a couple of shrubs. If that's all that's in the neighborhood, that's all you're going to get. If there's no fence on the property and you want a fence on the property, then it's going to have to be added in. Fences are probably, like I said, one of the most argued over things. And don't just say that the seller will provide a fence on, for the backyard. You need to get specific if you decide you want one. Matter of fact, anything you do in here, the more specific you can get, the better.
On fences, the best thing to do is to get a plat map of the property and do a Sharpie diagram and have both parties sign it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds simple and it should be, but that is the best.
Right. Here's where your warranty idea comes in. Seller warrants all workmanship and materials furnished shall be free from defects for a period of 1 year. Seller agrees to correct any defects. This is not a guarantee, folks. This is not something that, it just says that, we're going to make sure things are in working order. Now, you have to remember that all of the supplies, the furnace, the appliances, everything else, they're coming with their own warranty, right? You go out and buy a new stove, it's going to have at least a 1 year warranty on it. So the builder isn't going to take care of that. You're probably going to have to go back to Frigidaire and let them take care of it, or whoever the stove came through. But the seller's warranty hereunder does not extend to work, materials, or items included by third parties, like the stove, without limitation manufacturer's warranties. So all of the furnace, the HVAC, the windows, I've even seen the siding, if it's got a defect and it was supplied by a lumber yard, that's not on the builder. So unless they installed it incorrectly. And then there's a big red warning. Foregoing warranties are in lieu of all other warranties, express or implied, not limited to, and it goes through this big disclaimer, seller shall not be liable under any circumstances for incidental, consequential, or other damages arising from or on account of such defects in the work. So we're getting into legalese here. But like Blake said, the builder does not provide a Washington state recognized warranty. And you have to remember that if this isn't even the form that's used, the builder's going to have their own. They're going to say, yeah, we're going to come back and fix things for a year, like Blake said. Landed Gentry is great about that. So at 11.5 months, give us your punch list. We'll come back. We'll correct everything. That's what they do. But if you say, hey, my refrigerator quit, they're going to say, well, here's the warranty. It was in the kitchen drawer when you moved in. You need to call them to fix it. Here's your pre-closing inspection walkthrough within 5 days before closing. It's 5 days before closing. I would prefer, and Blake chime in? I would prefer to see it so many days after the final occupancy permit is issued. Because up until that point, there's really no point. But it talks.
Do you tie closing tightly with the occupancy permit, Greg? Because a lot of times, I mean, like Lori said, there's a lot to do still after occupancy permit has been issued.
Yeah, but it's more of the punch list stuff. So, yeah, we might have a punch list remaining after closing, but I try and get it all done before, if possible. Even though that little window's tight, it's hard to get that occupancy permit, and get the county out the day you need them, especially if you haven't pre-booked it, So
is 10 days of kind of the magic number for you?
Well, that's got 2 closing dates, a certain date, or I'll put within 5 days of occupancy permit. So one's closing and then one is the inspection above it. And every home is a little bit different and every buyer is different. Some buyers will not move in or close until, the punch list is done, which is smart, everybody. Just so you know, all the leverage is gone when you close. So,
but the more and there's good builders and there's not good builders, but the ones where we get involved and there becomes an issue is when the builder says, my subs are out on another project. I can't even get them back here to finish your punch list for another 10 days, but your closing date is Monday. And if you don't close on Monday, you're in default. I'm keeping all your non-refundable and I've got 3 people lined up behind you to buy the house. Then what happens? It's like when you do your final walkthrough on a residential resale. It's no different. When you go do your final walkthrough and they've moved that big area rug in the living room and there's a big ass stain in the middle of the room. So what happens? The buyer can't refuse to close. Remember that? We talked about that. But the seller is also obligated to clean the house just like they are in this contract and make it right. So this is why they pay you big money. You go back and you help negotiate this and try and find a solution that works for all parties. That's.
Yeah, I mean, I plead all you guys to watch David Knox's Are You a Messenger or a Negotiator? Right? I mean, watch that video. But, I've said this forever, all roads lead back to earnest money. And unfortunately, to dumb it down, it's a game of chicken, right? It's a game of chicken between the buyer and the seller. Who's going to blink? Are you not going to close because of that stain? Or are you? But that's where, like Lori said, that's where your skills, cool heads prevail. You'll be smarter tomorrow. I've always said that. Just, you got to stay calm.
I can't stress that enough. If you get nothing else, like I said, that is such a good piece of advice because at this point in time, I've seen buyers get really upset. And the last thing you want to do is buy into that and put fuel on the fire. So you acknowledge it and you can empathize with them, but you say, let's keep track and let's keep our eye on the ball. Let's see what we can do to get these problems remedied. So here we talk about closing date and completion. So here it says closing shall occur on the later of blank or blank after issuance of the building permit. So there's drop downs here, but they're just calendars. So the first option is a date, shall occur by the later of August 1st or 5 days after issuance of the occupancy permit, provided if the seller has not completed the improvements and obtained it prior to the closing date for any reason, that the seller may extend the closing date for up to 30 days without further liability. Notwithstanding the foregoing, any specific completion dates and closing dates given by the seller are subject to extension for a reasonable time. There is no legal definition of reasonable. 1 day, 3 day, 10 day, 30 day, 60 days, doesn't matter. At seller's option, due to the unavailability of material, labor disputes, weather conditions, blizzard in the middle of December, soil conditions, and other conditions beyond the seller's control. That paragraph alone gives the seller pretty much complete control of the closing date. So your buyer just needs to be aware of that. the ownership of the plans, who owns them, if they're provided by the builder. Buyer may at any time prior to closing request and be granted the right to copies of the plans. Buyer acknowledges said plans. They belong to the builder. They pay money for these and they can get a copy of them, but they cannot turn around if the deal falls through and build the same house on a different lot. Questions during construction. Buyer expects buyer to have questions. Buyer acknowledges the seller's subcontractors, employees, and real estate brokers have no authority to respond to buyer's questions. We ran into this. We had a buyer who kept showing up on the job site without size knowledge and making deals with the subcontractors for changes that she wanted made. And she was so pushy and convincing that they would do it. And then we got up to closing and the builder said, okay, here's your list of all the changes. And Cy and I were like, where in the heck did this come from? We didn't know anything about it. So keeping your client off of the job site is pretty important.
The funny thing about that was the listing agent had given her permission to do that without telling me. And so she was going on site, telling the builder, telling the subs what she wanted, without anything being written down. And then, come closing date, the builder was expecting like $10,000 extra for the work that was done. But my client was saying, I never recalled us to agreeing to anything. So
And nothing was in writing.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what was relayed verbally. There's nothing that I could do about it because I wasn't aware. And neither was the listing agent since she had given, the buyer to do that. So
in this case, we had a seller that balked builder and said, if you don't pay me more money, I'm going to go sell it to somebody else. I'm not going to sell it to you. And it really came to a dead stop. All right, so here's where that's covered. Buyer acknowledges to avoid interference with the work. And we've got seller liability insurance. The buyer goes on a job site and gets bonked on the head with a beam and, gets a concussion. So it says buyer may enter the property only during working hours with the permission of the seller. When viewing the property after working hours, they agree to do so only with the seller's listing broker present. Buyer and buyer's agents are expressly denied permission to work on the home during construction for any reason. If they do perform, the buyer accepts responsibility. This is just like a nightmare. So no, you don't get to go on the property unless the seller gives you permission to do so. And when you do so, I need to be present with you if that's what the builder wants. Sometimes the builder does not want the selling broker. They're like, thanks so much for the client. I'll gladly pay you your commission, but I'm taking it from here. That can happen as well. It just kind of depends. So that was the pre-sale addendum. I'm going to quickly go through the optional clauses. This is an additional addendum. This one was added in last year, actually, March of last year, revised. A 26A, pre-sale addendum, optional clauses. So this talks about selections, upgrades, and changes. So the two forms can be unique. In other words, you don't need to use them together. You can use them separately. So, and these are the ones that if it's checked, it applies. This talks about where the change order money goes, anything that affects the marketability of the property. Seller can reject the requested change, proceed with it, provided in addition to the cash payment, the buyer deposits into a restoration account. I have not dealt with this before, but I think that's a way to kind of try and protect the buyer in our multiples opinion, that it goes into like a third-party escrow account. I have never seen it happen, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But here is a landscaping allowance. And it gets a little bit more detailed. This is a good one. Now, like Greg said, you don't have to use this whole addendum or the other one. You can pick and choose the parts that you want. So seller's replication of a previous project. This would be like, I want my backyard, I want my fence, or the house down on lot 14 is the one that I want rebuilt here if it's a big development. Standard form of owner's policy. So obviously there's going to be title insurance. Here's the extended that Blake was talking about. And then it covers who is going to pay for that. Customer service, buyer acknowledges receipt of seller's written policy with regard to service if they've got one. Oak floors, driveways, and sidewalks. And it just basically says seller's responsible only until closing and they cannot warrant anything. I don't know why oak floors are in there. And frankly, I don't think we see a lot of them. But condition of drywall and siding, small cracks are inevitable. Seller will repair any problem once during the 1-year warranty period. After that, the seller's done. Things shrink, they expand, and cracks happen. Remedies and arbitration. So be kind of careful about recommending your buyer sign this. Arbitration is always better than a lawsuit, absolutely, positively. But this basically says if there's a dispute, they have to arbitrate, they can't sue. And there are cases where maybe the buyer should leapfrog over arbitration and jump straight to an attorney, or not. But the arbitration clause basically says that they are forced to arbitrate prior to litigate. Litigate is filing a lawsuit. If the agreement is subject to buyers obtaining financing and the buyer waives that, whether or not the waiver is or satisfaction is made upon demand of the seller, all earnest money shall immediately become non-refundable and immediately paid to seller. So this basically says once your financing is approved, you convert your earnest money to non-refundable and it goes to the seller. This is optional, remember, you got to check the box.
And it gives no provision for an appraisal. It's gone.
It's gone. Here's one that is becoming more and more common: price increase due to delay. Based on the seller being able to start construction within 30 days after mutual acceptance, this is basically a delay in starting. The one that we're seeing more commonly is an increase in material prices. And I wanted to show you, we had an addendum and I actually had it pulled up here. See if I can find it. What you're looking at here, yeah, here's one. This is a typical addendum down the road in a purchase and sale agreement. So buyer to credit seller $10,000 for added labor and product. I mean, countertops, cabinets, modification and assembly of chandelier, yada, yada, yada. Extension of closing date. This is turning into a custom from a spec. I like Greg's idea that, here's what it is. It's going to be beautiful. You're going to like it. You might be able to pick paint colors, but here's one that kind of gets out of hand. And they start going back and forth. So the builder gave them a price and then the buyer said, well, I want to downgrade that package. And so I want you to credit me back to things. And we've got broken windows, we've got window replacement, we've got a seller has contacted and paid for Judd & Black for the refrigerator freezer, which is on back order, and will release contact information and receipts to the buyer. The buyer wanted proof that the refrigerator had been paid for. This is just a little example of what kind of a addendum can be created. Seller will create and sign a personal guarantee of $10,000 to be held by Chicago Title until Whatcom County stormwater correction notice is satisfied and approved, then release back to the seller. Buyer accepts home is complete. No further work will be required of seller outside of Washington General Contractors 1-year warranty and completion of the correction notice from the Whatcom County stormwater. We had, this was probably in Sudden Valley. Here was another one. Buyer and seller agree buyer's home inspection will not be done prior to both the interior and exterior of home being finished and professionally clean. Buyer will prepare a punch list. Seller agrees to pay up to $650 towards the home inspection. There was a lot of negotiation that went on. These are all different transactions, by the way. Seller agrees to have the landscapers clean up the yard, have the heating ducts cleaned. That's a common one because there's a lot of construction debris that gets caught up in those heating ducts. That's not included in the contract that we just got done talking about. The seller then asked for a 1-year warranty. And if it failed to close, seller agrees to credit the buyer to cover storage fees. So we're getting into all kinds of stuff. Here was one that came up. This is an example of a builder written addendum. and I just wanted to show it to you. I'm not going to go through it. But this would trump, even if you included an offer with optional clauses or the pre-sale addendum, this is going to trump it like Blake said. Absolutely, positively. Oh, and that was the fraud thing. Julie, do you have a question for me? Us?
Yeah. So I'm the first person to write the most complicated addendum in the world. I'll cop to it. I'm all excited that I'm solving people's problems and using my big smart brain. And here I'd write one of those complicated addendums in a heartbeat. So I cop to that. Would you rather have us at that point say, here's the rough draft of our concerns. Take this to your attorney and have your attorney write the addendum? I've done it both ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice to have, but the reality is, Blake, have you ever seen a buyer actually go to an attorney in the beginning, not at the, they go to an attorney when they get pissed off and they don't want to buy the house or they don't think the seller is doing what they said they were going to do, then they have no problem going to an attorney. But up front, when everybody's holding hands and singing Kumbaya, we recommend it 100%, definitely. I don't know, Blake, chime in on that one.
Again, I mean, Greg's got a lot more experience than me, but I haven't seen it. You know, I haven't seen a buyer go to an attorney saying, hey, draft this addendum on these two.
And yes, Julie, you are probably the worst offender about.
One thing I'll say is there's particular builders down in South Mount Vernon, Snohomish, that they have their own builder's addendum, and you need to read them. Buyers need to read them, because this one says they have their own financing company.
Oh, that's one.
And they want you to use them.
Yeah.
And if you use them, then you get, you know, like a credit of some sort. And it wasn't small, but you know, it was something. But if you have your already pre-approved with Umpqua or somebody else, and you come in with your own financing, the fine print in there says you now pay for all the seller's closing costs, including excise tax. Guess what? Buyer missed it. Selling agent missed it. Here comes the HUD. Bum, ba-da-da. There's an extra, you know, 20 grand, whatever, 18 grand, 15 grand on there. And they're a deer in headlights. And the listing agent says, well, read the builder's addendum. So I'm just saying, I mean, they worked it out kind of. I think the selling agent actually had to cough up a pretty good chunk. But the builder was not going to bend. And I'll tell you another deal where actually it was an Annie one I read, that buyer is buying a new construction, things clicking along. And after a month or two or whatever, says, hey, we want to switch our financing. We want to go from this to that. Builder says, fine, $30,000 increase.
Wow.
So can anybody tell me a good way to get around that? This is an extra point. This is extra points. Tessa, you're always up for extra points.
To get around, okay, so just to be clear here, get around when you say, I want to change lenders, and the builder says, sure, no problem, cough up 30 grand.
Cough up 30 grand. So how can the buyer not pay the 30?
Oh, you guys should know this one. There is a way.
Really, it applies to a lot of different stuff.
Yep. Yeah, it does. Come on,
You
Trish.
just waive your financing contingency and you don't tell them?
Pretty close. You just change anyway.
Right. And you don't tell them.
Right, yeah, it says if you don't get the seller's permission, then you're in default. But you're only in default, you guys. This is extra credit. You're only in default if you want to get out of the deal and you want your earnest money back. Because then the lender has to fork over a letter that says A, B, and C. Well, they're going to miss one of them because you reapplied at a different time for a different loan. But if everything goes great, save the 30, march to closing with well, it might be difficult with the VA because it requires a mandatory clause, but I've seen it still happen. You're still going to closing with all the money and you save 30 grand. That's extra credit.
That was good.
Blake, haven't you waived your appraisal at that point?
maybe. But again, pick your poison. You want to pay 30 more?
Right. The question is, are you willing to waive? X
Yeah, because
amount?
I ran into that scenario.
There was a that happened on just a regular old deal. And the buyer wanted to switch to VA. Seller said, no, you're not going to do VA. I don't want a VA appraisal stuck on this house. Blah, 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 blah. No, you can't go VA. And they said, well, okay. So I get the email string from the lender and from him, and it says, keep marching forward, go VA, just go. And the seller there's nothing they got to closing, all the money was there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's nice that you can rattle your saber and say, you're in default, but you're only in default if you want to get your earnest money back due to financing.
Right. And I've also seen it, I mean, this is getting technical, but if you don't cancel the first loan application, right, but you go out and make another one, so you're basically working with two lenders in parallel, and for whatever reason it fails with the second lender, I've actually seen it come back where the buyer then makes the demand for the earnest money, goes back to the first lender, gets a turn down letter because they didn't cancel the deal. And the reason they were changing lenders was because they were having difficulty getting qualified there, and they were entitled to their earnest money back, even though we knew that they had gone to a second lender. Annie said because they hadn't canceled the first loan application and they actually got a turn down from the first people who they had applied with, they were entitled to their earnest money back. That's a messy form.
So just from Lori and I's perspective, not good practice.
No, no, I'm not saying do it. No, thank you. So I think we've probably raised more questions on this class today than maybe we've answered, but the goal was not to answer every question because I think you've gathered that almost every new construction transaction is going to be unique. What we were trying to do today is open your eyes to some different things that you may run across. And there are things that if you haven't gone through new construction, you don't even think about, like fences and whatever. Blake and I are more than happy to help fix things if they're at least addressed, but if they're not addressed at all in a contract, then it makes it difficult to insert them at a later time. But you're talking about a lot of non-refundable money. You're talking about a property that's gone up in value where the seller may or may not have any inclination to continue on with your purchase agreement. If you've got a great builder, that's one thing. If you don't, then, heads up, buyer beware. There's just a lot of ins and outs. That being said, new construction can be a really lucrative part of your business. So if you're thinking about exploring it, and you should be familiar, in my opinion, with all of the developments or all of the builders in your local marketing area. So if you're in Anacortes, you should be out driving around, looking at all the developments. So, because trust me, your buyers they're out there looking. Up here in Ferndale and Blaine and Birch Bay and Linden, there's all kinds of new developments going on. But
if you guys really want to sink your teeth into it, go on the multiple, find out new construction, click on attachments. They'll have their builder's addendums on there.
Good point. Good point.
Read them. See what the differences are.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe top 5 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen new construction transactions go smooth as glass when you've got a really picky buyer that can't find what they want in a resale. Maybe it's a little farther out than they want, but there's some beautiful projects that they can actually get their dream home.
That's only when Greg's a listing agent, though. Full disclosure.
Yeah, right.
Remember the walkthrough.
Yeah, remember the walkthrough.
The rules of the game.
Just bring a gin and tonic to that walkthrough, man. It sail through.
So do you go to the walkthrough, Greg, as a listing broker to be there for the builder?
Yeah, I won't let I deal with little guys, a couple big guys, but I treat them all the same. And if it's a pre-sale, it's not listed and we're almost done, or we're done and it's all shiny and everything. If it's framed or anywhere, they don't get the opportunity to write an offer unless we all have a powwow. And it's amazing. In that little 45-minute walkthrough, like I don't have something that I go through, a sheet or anything, but I'm thinking about that pre-sale addendum. And like the closing date that you were just talking about a little while ago, huge for the seller. And if any of you are listing for a builder and you want to sell a pre-sale, that extra 30 days, the seller gets that automatically. And we never hit the date. We think, oh, we got plenty of time. We can close in 30, or we can close in 60, close in 90. Never happens. Don't get that occupancy permit. The house isn't cleaned. Punch list isn't done. So that extra 30 for the seller is huge, but it should be talked about because the buyer has to have plan B. They have to have occupancy somewhere, and you've got to help them think 120 days down the road if necessary, even though it says 90, So all those things are so important. That $30,000 fee that's buried in that builder contract. If it's me, I'm going to talk about it at that walkthrough. Surprises are horrible in our business, and the more we can keep things smooth, limit the changes. Don't let Julie write that addendum. We can keep it. Say no, and then okay if you have to. It can be a very smooth process, and to buy a new home is wonderful. So
Got that new home smell.
exactly. I don't know what that spray was for, but
I
got a case of it.
Well, and the guy
Delisa doesn't know where it's hidden.
the builder was dumb enough to tell our selling broker, who was there right before her client showed up, what he was doing. I mean, this guy is not, anyway. So I hope you learned something today. Thank you, everybody, but especially, Blake and GP, Greg, for jumping on, and Cy for contributing, and Julie and everybody else that did. So that wraps that up. Monday, we will continue with, hold on here. Monday's class is, the 22s and the 90s. They're just odd little addendums that you need to know about, the miscellaneous stuff. So we're going to be wrapping it up. I don't know that we're going to have a class on Thursday because I don't know that we're going to need one. We've done pretty well about keeping within our time frame here. So Monday may be our wrap up. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Go enjoy some sunshine. Thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate you. Have a great weekend. Bye.